Okay, thank you for coming. Really excited for the turnout and the program here. This is Adapt, Adopt, Advance, a panel discussion on open educational resources. Today, you're going to hear a lot about resources that get around traditional copyright in order to be shareable. A couple of announcements at the close of this panel. There will be details about how you can work with the library to help us qualify for a grant called the PA Goal Library Licensed Materials Grant that will get us additional money for unlimited access ebook versions of readings in your classes. So items covered by traditional copyright. Other announcement is there will be questions taken on chat. I just want to give a special thank you and shout out to Christina Dorset for doing this. There will be opportunity to ask those questions after the presenters. She's worked on design and social media promotion, and this would not be happening if not for her efforts. So a lot of labor in libraries is invisible, so thank you, Christina. Okay, so today we're going to look at some of the nuts and bolts of open education resources as a strategy to make higher education more affordable through the use of shareable course materials. Now, while course materials aren't the entire problem of college cost, it is one that's in our power to improve upon through organizing and sharing efforts and resources. I'm going to give a short introduction before the speakers, I hand it off to the speakers, just so we're on some of the same page with some of the terms that we'll be using. Mostly by what we mean by open. A couple ways you might have heard this. First, open access. This is freely accessible materials that are available online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. A nice operable definition of copyright is who owns a work, who can share it, who can profit from it. Of course, libraries have a key interest in copyright because this is how we share our collection materials and in the environment that we exist on. One example I could say is when I buy an ebook for the library collection, there are different licenses for the amount of users that work can have. And the more users we want to be able to access it, the higher we have to pay. Now, OERs are a kind of open access material. These are educational materials that are either in the public domain or covered by a certain type of open license. Now, this definition lists a bunch of different formats. We'll partly be hearing about textbooks and course modules through Canvas, but that's not exclusive. Syllabi, curricula, lecture notes, assignments, assessments, all are potentially coverable by a public domain or Creative Commons license and can be used as open education resources. In order to qualify, we go by something called the 5 R's. This was developed by a fellow at Creative Commons named Dave Wiley. Now, reuse is sort of the kind of use you expect to have access to with any sort of resource, copyright or open. You have it, you can access it again. You know, education is a wide variety of uses, and we have, through practices like fair use, there's a lot we can do with any given resource. Retain. In this day and age, media that's born digital or bought digital is often subject to digital rights management, a sort of tools that may block you from sharing, from duplicating a given work. This is true of commercial textbooks. This is a problem that OER can address. I'm going to talk about the next two R's together: revise and remix. This is how you may have permission to edit a work. Really, it's mostly about how dramatic the change is. Think of if you're a farmer at a dairy farm, and if you milk your cow, you can retain that milk. A procedure like pasteurization would be revising it. And then, of course, you know, all the milk products that could be derived from it would be an example of how you remix it. And finally, redistribution. Is this shareable? There is an alphabet soup of different ways that you can share your works provided by Creative Commons. In this chart, we can see you've got CC, you've got CC BY, SA, and D, and C. Just a brief rundown of how this is something that a lot of what we're going to hear about today is covered by one license like this or another. The bottom line is that you have the right to release something into the public domain. Lots of government materials, lots of materials that might be older than January 1st, 1925. Those are freely usable and shareable. If you want to be credited for your work, you're going to have some sort of CC BY that applies to what you're releasing. If you include the text of the license that Creative Commons offers, it shows you the rights you retain. And there's a version of it at the bottom of this graphic. As a creator using Creative Commons, you do have the option to close your work from commercial use. That's where you'll see CC BY and C for non-commercial. You do have the option to create something that cannot be revised or remixed. So something covered by the license that includes ND would mean no derivatives. And then finally, share alike means just that you as the creator say, you have my permission to reuse this, but you have to use a similar license to the one I'm using. So some of these licenses are good for OERs, others not so much. It is confusing at first, but the more you work with them, the more you'll get, the more it makes sense. So with that, I'm going to bring on our first speaker. Stephanie Schechner is professor of French and chair of modern languages. She teaches all levels in the French program, from elementary French through the senior seminar. She's taught all courses in the French curriculum at Widener, and she uses OERs in her elementary and intermediate French classes, as well as her upper division literature classes. Let's get you unmuted, and please welcome Stephanie Schechner.
Hi, thanks so much, Adam, for organizing this panel and inviting me to join in. I'm just going to give a brief talk about what I use and why I use it. And I don't have a PowerPoint. I hope that's okay. I use a single OER. It's called Français Interactif. And essentially, this has replaced the textbook for the first 4 semesters of French language. So for French 101, 102, elementary French, 1 and 2, and then French 201 and 202, which is the intermediate level. My first reason for doing this was the financial concern of students. Language textbooks in particular are quite expensive. For years, I sort of made the case that if you took 4 semesters of French, you would use a single textbook. So at least you would get 4 semesters worth, but it was still, nearly $200. And so that's a lot for a student to come up with all at once. I first shifted to online homework systems similar to something like MathLab that gives students immediate feedback on as much work as possible to sort of gauge how that would work with students before I shifted to an OER. So I had some experience working with online systems, and one of the benefits of them is that instantaneous feedback for homework for students. So the OER I chose comes out of the University of Texas, Austin. So the benefit of this OER is that it's been vetted on a large group of students over time, and it's been developed by a team of people who have the expertise in second language acquisition to put together a thoughtful program of in terms of the sequence of chapters, the kinds of vocabulary, it's what I would call a pretty darn good online textbook. Pretty good. It's not an A+ textbook. It doesn't get updated. It is not super culturally diverse or representative of the French-speaking world. It's very France-focused. It is a little corny sometimes. It's aimed at a UT Austin target market. And so they have videos with students from UT Austin studying in France. They have little characters like an armadillo named Tex as cartoon characters. So I tell students, like, it's a little corny, but it's free. And amazingly, students don't complain that much when it's free. Now, because it's free, it doesn't have the back end that generates grading reports or information about how my students are doing on their homework. So students typically will take screenshots of their work. So they do the work, they submit it, it shows what they got right and wrong. And for homework in French, really just grading to see that they're doing it, right? Because they're getting the feedback, they can do it as many times as they want. I'm not really looking to grade them to knock off points because they conjugated a verb wrong. So they upload screenshots. I would say that this has worked particularly well at this stage of my career, and I'm pretty advanced in my career because I have the expertise to know what the limitations of this were, and I had plenty of materials and my own knowledge to supplement it. So I've been doing a unit on Guinea in West Africa alongside the current chapter I'm doing. That in the unit in the book is all France focused. But because I've traveled to Guinea, I've had students from Guinea, I've found online videos of someone giving sort of everything you need to know from a young person's perspective about Guinea, and a music compilation video about Guinea from YouTube. I can flesh out and provide additional materials. I think it would have been a lot harder for me to use an OER at the beginning of my career. At the beginning of my career, I really needed a textbook that was going to provide thoughtful and visual supports about the full French-speaking world. So that would be one sort of limitation potential, depending on the one that's chosen. I have had, on the flip side, at the upper end of the spectrum, my upper division courses, I have worked using a free digital library that is a part of the Center for la Francophonie in Canada. And they have a Bibliothèque des Amériques, so a library of the Americas. And it has writings, everything is digital, and anyone can join. And you get essentially a library card, and it functions like a library. You can check out a limited number of texts per month digitally. You can access them either online, or you can download them and use them until they expire using Adobe Digital Editions. And we have used full books where we've read them as a class, and the center has a program where students can then dialogue with authors if we apply for a program. And so several years we've done video chats with Canadian authors. This semester, I wasn't expecting to be working with the center, but students, we started doing research projects, and students really liked a particular short story I had chosen for the class, and they wanted to read more short stories by that author. And we found that this library had enough copies of the book that they could go in and check them out, and they've been able to do their research projects by checking out books from an online digital library. We've had great collaborations with this center and with that library that have allowed upper division classes to keep the costs down there as well. I think I'm going to pause there, and if people want to know more about either of those, they can. The last thing I would just mention, though, is that it's not an OER, but Widener's subscription to LinkedIn Learning has also been something that I've used with my students in a course where they were working on things related to professional development, learning how to do informational interviews and things like that. Another great digital resource that didn't cost my students anything, kind of at the back end. They paid upfront with their tuition.
As they do with so many things. Great. Thank you, Stephanie, so much. Moving right along. Next up, we have Scott Van Bremer, who is a professor of chemistry, who teaches general chemistry to science and engineering students and upper level courses for chemistry majors. His undergrad education was at Colorado College, and he attended the University of Colorado in Boulder for graduate school. Afterwards, he taught at Lock Haven University for 2 years before starting at Widener in 1994. And please welcome, as I asked to unmute, Scott Van Bremer.
Hi, thank you, Adam, and thank you, Stephanie. So what I'm going to do is share with you, and some of you have already actually, looking at the audience, seen my sort of little song and dance about this. So I teach, what I'm going to talk about today is what I use. I'm teaching general chemistry for science and engineering majors. There's a book where, you know, traditionally they've always bought a textbook. The textbook is really important to students being successful in the class. And the textbook can cost $300 if you pay for the print, brand new edition, hard copy, not used, with the homework. It's really expensive. So this has been sort of an issue for years. And this semester I'm teaching a small section, and I decided to give this a try. And so I'm going to just share my pitch. This is sort of going whole hog. I'm going to share my screen if you'll let me. Right now it's saying host disabled participant screen sharing. All right, so now we've got it.
Bear with me, I'm working the,
I think you got it. Everybody should be able to see. So the system I'm using is called libratext. And I want to start on this page to let you know libratext is funded by the National Science Foundation. It started off in chemistry. It's been expanding So I saw Jessica is here. There's some humanities content. And for Luke, there's some social science content. I don't know what the depth is, but if you go to libratexts.org, you can find out. The thing that's really cool here that I want to show is, Adam talked about the different types of Creative Commons licensing. And the idea of this LibreText is that this is a front end that lets you take full advantage of all of that. And so, like I said, this is most developed for chemistry, but sort of as an instructor, I started off with this thing they call the remixer. And so I go here and essentially I can go into a bookshelf for general chemistry, which is the course I'm teaching. And this is Creative Commons licensing material that's available for teaching general chemistry. And so this is the OpenStax textbook, but it's also lots and lots of other resources. And I was fascinated to find stuff that I came across on the internet like 20 years ago when we all used the Netscape browser. But what this lets me do is it lets me go in to say, there's a lot of content in the OpenStax textbook that I like. And so I can say, all right, I'm going to skip chapter 1. I'm going to start with chapter 2. And I just drag that over here. And that becomes my new chapter 1. And then I'm kind of weird. So I want to go to the gases chapter next. But in the gases chapter, yeah, this kinetic molecular theory, that's really boring. My students don't like it. So I'm going to delete it. And so I can go in and then, but I can say, oh, and while they're doing the gases, there's this really good video in this other source. And I'm going to take that gas video and I'm going to stick that here. And then this other one, I'm going to stick after this section. And so I can literally create a custom textbook rearranged from any Creative Commons OER source that I can find that's in there. And if there's something that is out there that they don't know about, they'd love to hear about it, they'll add it. All right, so that's the remixing piece that let me create a custom textbook for my students. But the other piece that this lets you do is it lets you edit. So after I've created that book, I can go in here and I can say, oh, in this section, I don't like that picture. So I can go in and I can edit. This is now sort of like my copy of everything. I can edit it and I can do whatever I want. I can change anything I want in here. Any pieces that I don't like, I can delete. If I've got a better picture, I can add it. So this then lets me not just remix, but also completely rewrite it. And so all of the pet peeves, the things I don't like, the outdated language that's in most textbooks, like I just fixed it. And this is super easy. I like rebuilt a whole textbook for my course in 3 days over winter break. But then what I want to show you next is after that's done, sort of how you can make it available to your students. So one way is in the LibreText website, this book exists. And you can go to LibreText and you can go to Widener University, my course, and the whole book is there. I can give students links to the whole textbook, or, this week we're doing the gas laws chapter. So today for class, I gave students for Friday's lecture, I'll give them a link to this class, this page. This is what we're doing in class that day. The other, so that's one way students can access it. The other way they can access it is they can just download a PDF of the whole textbook and keep it on their laptop. Or they can download a PDF of this page or this chapter, and they can keep it on their book, on their laptop. And some students prefer that. Other students, if you go to the web-based version, there's lots of features built in, like it's got, if anybody's used Hypothesis, that's built into the system. And so anybody with a hypothesis account can come in, they can annotate and mark up and highlight to their heart's content. We can, I know some people in humanities have done some stuff where you get the whole class to annotate a resource together. And so you can do that. That's all built in. The other option is, if you're old school, is they'll do custom publishing. So for $20, I got a printed copy of my book. And they printed it, they mailed it to me. It took a week and a half. If I paid an extra $10, I could have gotten it in color. And then the other way, wait, there's more. This is just like Ginsu knives. Is the whole textbook, libratext, will save it as a course cartridge file format. And after creating my book, I clicked on one button, I downloaded a file, and then I imported this into a Canvas course, and each chapter is a module. So it's all built out here as modules. You can click in, access all the sections, go between the sections. I could add all the stuff that you can do in Canvas with modules to control when it's available, that they have to read it before they can go to the next one, they have to answer a question. Like, you could do all of that. I could have gone totally bonkers and spent my whole winter break doing this, but I didn't. So that's the quick overview of what this system will allow you to do. And it's sort of, my brain is still bending in new and different ways to think about how this is going to change how I teach. And so I'm going to stop there so that we have plenty of time for questions. And it looks like, from the way Adam has this set up, that if you have a question, you should chat, and then you can get unmuted.
Yeah, Christina has just put a message in the chat. She is our Q&A guru at this time. She will be feeding things in behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Scott, for your informative discussion on LibreTexts and its uses. I want to introduce our next speaker. I'm thrilled to have Anjuli Hendee from Teaching and Learning with Technology, where she is an instructional designer. She has taught and worked in higher education for over 10 years and recently joined Widener in 2020. Anjuli and the TLT team are advocates for using OERs in course content to provide accessible and equitable opportunities for all learners. So take it away, Anjuli.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I am actually going to stop share for a moment and go back to this. And I'm so grateful that I'm following Scott, because Scott's presentation fits right into what I wanted to talk about today, about open education resources and Canvas. So Scott had a really great course integration, and that is something that TLT can help you with open educational resources. We're here to help you with any Canvas integrations on a course level. If you have a tool or a text, please come to us and we are happy to help. Two things that I'm going to touch upon today are Canvas Commons and Hypothesis, which Scott also mentioned a little earlier. In Canvas Commons, TLT can help create groups, which allows you to share content with specific individuals, perhaps faculty members within your department. And then the other thing that we can help you with is connect you with our hypothesis specialists. as a digital annotation tool that is integrated into all Canvas courses, we have the ability and the fortune of having someone who works directly with us to provide training options. So let's go ahead and talk about Canvas Commons. We've talked a lot about Creative Commons and the ability to have OERs in that space. Canvas has their own commons, which is a space within Canvas where you and educators can find, import, and share resources. So they might be textbooks, course templates, Canvas modules, pages, quizzes. It's a vast opportunity of exploration for things that are already built into Canvas that you might want to integrate into your Canvas courses. When we're in Canvas Commons, there's a few things we might want to consider. The option of creating groups with Widener faculty to share content. And what that means is in Canvas Commons, we have the opportunity to create and share content that we might find or we might hone on our own into specific groups. So departmentally, if you decide we're going to work together and explore Commons and find what templates or what text we might use that could be helpful to other faculty members while they teach, you can put it into a specific group. It's a great way to also have, course pages or assignments that you may have created in your course. And instead of having to, say, let me export it, or let's create a master to share the content, a master shell. Another option might be to have a group created in Commons where you could share Canvas pieces, such as the pages or the assignments or a module. There's a variety of ways that you can use Commons and the groups to meet your needs of your work or your departments. Adam touched upon this earlier, copyright. We want to be really mindful of copyright because even though OERs are free of cost, they're not free of copyright. And the great thing about the OERs that are available in Commons, the ones that are copyrighted, typically in the top right-hand corner, they will have the source. And you can click on that source and it links out. So if you decide to use or import content from Canvas Commons into your course, just make sure we keep that copyrighted material on there and we keep the source. And then the last thing that we really want to consider when we are using Canvas Commons is importing only the content that you need. So Canvas Commons offers you two opportunities, two ways to actually import content into your Canvas course. You can import directly from Commons, and there's a button, and I will show you that in just a moment. And you can import the entire Canvas Commons subject and content that you've selected. Or you can select specific content. So let's say you pick out a textbook or a course that has 2 modules that you really like. You can use the download function and import the select content into your Canvas course. Now, both options do the same thing. Sometimes it might seem easier just to import all the content and pick and choose what you want to keep or what you might want to delete. The only thing that you need to be careful of is when you import the entire package from Commons directly into your course. Sometimes, like let's say there's a home page, it will take on the characteristics of the entire Commons package. So if our blueprint has already been in your course and you decide, I want to pull this entire course from Canvas Commons and you import it, if there's a home page, that home page might directly take on the homepage view of your course. That does not mean your content is lost. All of your course content is in your course. It just means you're going to have to go back and redo your settings. If this sounds like a lot, one option that you might want to consider is playing with Commons outside of your live course. So if you play with it outside of your live course, you can request a course shell from TLT, and we're happy to create that. And if you want to use Commons and work with someone else to figure out what works best, they can also be added to that shell. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like within Commons. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my Canvas dashboard. When I'm in my Canvas course, if I look on the left-hand side navigation, I see the Canvas Commons, which if you look at the icon is very similar to the icon for Creative Commons. So when we click on that, we are in the main hub of Canvas Commons. And the great thing about Canvas Commons is that you have a search function. You can see what has been shared, what you have already imported, if there's any updates to your imports. And you can favorite with the star, you can favorite which ones you like. I like the fact that you can search by title, institution, or name, and this filter. This filter within Canvas Commons allows you to specifically seek out what you want at an age-appropriate level for the content you are teaching. So if I am looking specifically for graduate content related to templates, I might select graduate and templates. As a default for us at Widener, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, undergrad and graduate grade levels have been selected. And just look at the variety that we have. We have modules, we have assignments, quizzes, discussions, pages. All of these options are available, and you can specifically pinpoint the type of content you want. And at the bottom, we see the shared with option. All is the includes public resources, or if you're looking specifically within the Widener community and what is shared, now that I've checked that, I go back to Commons and I see all of our faculty members who have created things, who have shared items within Canvas Commons. To go ahead and import something from Commons, I'm going to go ahead and select, let's say I will select a law course. I would like actually a nature of leadership template. I can go in Canvas Commons, you have a preview, and this preview is key to understanding what content you're bringing over and how it will look within your course. Here we see modules, there's an assignment and a file. If I look to the right of the preview, it gives me details, it gives me the author, it gives me the account, and version notes. If there are updates made to a template, you will see it here. Updated at this time versus the first original upload. So I'm going to go ahead and select import and download. And here I see all of my courses. These are my courses, so I can go ahead and select a course if I'm directly importing into my Canvas course, or I can select the download function and then I can upload it at a later date. I'm going to go ahead and select my sandbox. I'm going to import it into my course, and it will tell me that I've successfully started the import. I will wait for it. And if I go back into my course, I will see that it is now available. The content I have imported is available, while my content that was already within the course is still there. So that is how we can go ahead and share within Canvas Commons and use it within our course. So I'm going to go back to our presentation and talk about a tool that we have, which is hypothesis. And Scott was so kind to talk about hypothesis and the ways to use it as a digital annotation tool. And it really is that. You can work with your students. You can make notes within the margin of digital text. And it's a way to foster collaborative discussions and critical thinking and create a deeper understanding of the readings that you might be discussing in your course. Readings are not the only things you can use, but you can use hypothesis within case studies, videos, images, collaborative lecture documents, PDFs, use it for peer reviews and group work. Students can respond in a variety of ways: text, links, attachments. They can respond in video files, in GIFs, in group work. The possibilities are endless. So it's really a great tool that is already integrated into our Canvas courses that everyone can use. And just as a way to demonstrate what it looks like, this is an article that was online, and it was in a hypothesis course, actually our hypothesis training course, which is a self-enrolled course. And you can see along the right-hand side, we have annotations that someone responded and added a link to an article. So other people have replied to the different comments that are made. So it's really a great tool and something that I encourage everyone to try and explore with. So to kind of wrap it up with Canvas and OERs, these are the different contexts that you can have, and I will drop all of these links into the chat in just a minute. TLT office at widener.edu. Please send us an email if you're interested in course integrations, Canvas Commons support, or you just have questions about OERs and Canvas and how they work together. Hypothesis, we have a technical support contact, and we have our client success specialist, Erin Barker. She's fantastic. She actually is someone who will schedule trainings, work with you one-on-one, and she is who we also go to for support. So thank you, and I'm going to drop the links within the chat. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Anjuli. And I will note that I relayed a link that was shared by Jessica Story on how to request a course shell from TLT, and we'll be doing the same with Anjuli's links as well. So to open up the question and answer period, and this could be for anyone who chooses to answer. What concerns did you have about OERs as pedagogical resources before you decided to use them?
So I guess, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, go, Scott. Go. You go first. I'll go second. Go.
Right. I mean, so my original concern was organization and structure, and I was a little concerned about the quality of the content. You know, once I found out about this, like remixing and that I could edit things, then that relieved a lot of that concern. And you know, what I found is that the sort of the reading level and the questions and everything in the materials I found have been right where I want them to be in terms of the Widener students. So it all seems to be working out well. I was also a little concerned with students not having a printed book to work from, because I saw students who did that were often more successful in my class. So far, I don't feel like that's been a problem. If I do this again, I might encourage more students to order the $20 printed copy. But they're used to this now, especially after the last 2 years.
Yeah, I would say that too. I was concerned just about myself not having a physical book to refer to. But I think the last 2 years really kicked my butt forward in terms of use of technology. And I found that if you can get it on the screen and everyone can see it together, it takes care of the problem of people forgetting their books. It's like, well, sorry, you didn't forget it. It's here, look, all the time, everywhere. So it took away some of the barriers to entry. One of my concerns, and it still is a concern, is sometimes about the quality and the vetting of the information. And so I can say, like I said, I wouldn't give the one I use an A+, but I regularly supplement it. And like, you know, when I've looked on Canvas Commons, there is a lot of stuff from high school teachers, okay? And I would say that the approaches of high school teachers are not the approach that I'm taking, both in terms of a lot of their materials on Canvas are in English. Just even their setting up of the course is in English, where I'd really prefer that to be in French. And the courses themselves, again, are very France focused. I think this is something that needs to be done in terms of education for teachers. But again, I'm very capable of supplementing and expanding and surrounding. I think, you know, what Scott was expressing in terms of I can repackage this in the way that makes sense, you know, has alleviated some of my concerns. And the students, you know, I'm looking at the whole OER and looking at its defects as an educator. My students are really only looking at the parts I tell them to go look at. They are not ranging through and critiquing it and finding out all the defects. They're going to the pages that I link to. And then when I give them other stuff, they look at other stuff. So I think some of the defects might be less obvious to students.
Thank you. How have students responded to OERs in use? Do they note it? Do they give you feedback? Do they like it?
Well, they're very happy about not cost, about the zero cost. They are. You definitely have their attention when you're telling them, if you continue in French, there will not be a cost other than, and we've actually shifted and added something that we hadn't done in the past. We have them sign up for online video chat with native speakers, and they can get 6 15-minute sessions for $45. So, you know, $45, and I talk to a real person in another country versus $200, and I kill a tree and I have this really big book that I might not use after one semester. They seem to be pleased with that trade-off. And during COVID, evidently the parents were very impressed to hear their students, their children actually talking to someone, not a teacher, online and really making use of digital. So in my mind, I also was replacing some of the costs with something else that has a higher value, I think.
I think for the students I have this semester, has been like a non-issue. Like I got kind of like all wigged out and excited about it, and they're kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's just a chemistry book.
I have to say, one thing that I do like about OERs that I think that sometimes gets overlooked when we have textbooks that are in print form is the accessibility and the equity when we look at it for students. So an online text or a digital text that you might be able to hear through a reed speaker or a device that it's not necessarily, oh, does this book come in Braille or does this book come in different formats? It provides a far better experience for those students that we are missing. And I also heard that Stephanie's probably going to work really hard and come up with that Commons course for graduate and undergraduate, because it's apparently a really big piece that's missing from Canvas Commons.
Well, I'm at least gonna spread the word that people with teams of educators who can work together on it should be doing it, because there's definitely room for it out there. As a one-person program, it's not going to be me that does it, but I think I'm going to reach out to people at big universities who often write textbooks and say, hey, what if you did this?
You know, and I think that the libratext model could be a really powerful thing, because, you know, essentially they got a bunch of money from NSF to host this and set it up, but they've developed a community that's developing the content and they're curating the content. So, you know, when I go to places like, there's a lot of science online content in Merlot and the stuff that's in the Canvas Commons, and sort of the amount of time and effort it takes to curate and sort through it and find stuff that I like is not much different than what it would take for me to just create it myself from a blank slate. But the amount of time and effort that's gone into the editing and the curating and the sort of the quality of the figures and things like that, that was possible with a program like libratext, where there are a lot of people contributing to this project. It's a really different. It gets it into the right league for what I'd want to use in my class.
An audience question. This one comes from Joanne Cahoon Keating. Has anyone considered OER as foundational material, perhaps something to address recent learning loss concerns, similar to LinkedIn learning material? And I'll ask you to unmute there, Joanne, in case you want to elaborate.
So let me say that I had been using the OER that I'm now using as a textbook previously. I would direct students to this for how to get yourself warmed up at the beginning of the fall semester after having the summer off. So I had been directing students to this resource for a long time for just the simple summer learning loss that might happen between the end of high school and the beginning of college, or between any 2 years of study. And so this particular OER does lend itself to self-paced, self-guided learning. And yes, I think ideally that these could help with learning loss across a variety of subjects. Scott, I don't know if that's your experience, or Anjuli, what your take on that would be, but that's what I would say to that.
Okay. Another question, this one from Deb Morley. The deans of our colleges and schools are very supportive of the OER initiative at Widener. What can we do to get more faculty involved in this potentially tremendous cost savings for our students? Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you. Faculty would need course release to devote time to this. If the university wants this, at the bare minimum, there would need to be course release, if not also additional training on how to do it. Developing quality course materials takes time and is ideally done not by an individual, but by a team. I was part of a team that was piloting real old school textbooks that were being written by faculty at the University of Wisconsin back in the day. And to be done properly, you want to have a pilot, you want to test it out on students, you want to get feedback on how well or how not well it's working. And it's not the endeavor of a single person, ideally. I really, regardless of their expertise in the area, it's not like writing a monograph. When you're trying to make something teachable, like that is for teaching, you need a different skill set. I was somebody who was actually trained to teach. Most of my colleagues weren't. But doing this and doing it well really requires time, and ideally at least a team to get the benefits of multiple points of view, different forms of expertise. That's what I would say we would need.
A little follow-up question from Deb. Which part of our faculty governance can help lead this?
In my mind, this is really, you know, places where I know that this is happening at Widener. I think it's about faculty in a department deciding that this is a priority, and it's about faculty in that department that's supporting each other to do this, right? It's about finding resources, you know, for if there's something in libratext that would cover what you're looking for in a course, then like, wow, it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. But if you're sorting through the whole internet to try and find content and remix it, and that's a huge job. And sort of carving out the time. And I think Stephanie's idea, you know, you gotta just try stuff, and then you need the support of your colleagues to refine and revise it and fine tune it.
Okay, we are about at time, and we do have to scatter to respective Zooms that follow. A couple quick things I'd like to, what I teased at the beginning, for those of you in the faculty who want to contribute to affordable learning in general, it's not all Creative Commons. The library is going to be submitting a grant April 1st to get reimbursed for unlimited user non-DRM ebooks that replace materials for existing courses. So it's, you know, not just textbooks. Think of your humanities courses with the long reading lists. If you think there's you know, there's materials that you use regularly, and that could we could take the burden off with for your students. Get in touch with your liaison librarian. We're looking to get the all the materials requested by February 25th. And of course, if you have questions, here are the presenters and myself. Thank you for coming. Let's make college affordable.